Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Blended Marketing, Reaching Diverse Audiences, the latest event in the Detroit Regional Chamber's Black and Diverse Owned Business Series. I'm Tammy Carnreich. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber. We are very pleased to continue this series as part of our Racial Justice and Economic Equity Initiative, and to support small, medium, and even large diverse-owned businesses in Southeast Michigan. In today's landscape, as the country, the Detroit region, we grow more diverse, it's more important than ever to understand and to take into account the backgrounds and the differences of consumers when you're crafting your marketing plans and your messages. However, developing an effective marketing strategy that resonates with diverse audiences can be very, very challenging. And luckily, we have a very, very talented panel of experts today to talk to you about that and show us all how to do it. Before I get to the main program, I must say thank you to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. They have sponsored our entire Diverse Business Owned series. They're great partners. We couldn't do it without them. And then additionally, thank you to Michigan Economic Development Corporation's Pure Michigan Business Connect for their promotional partnership of this series also. You should learn more about PMBC, Pure Michigan Connect. If you don't already know it, it's a great opportunity for your business and procurement opportunities. And you'll hear more about that coming in the fall. So for now, let me turn it over to your moderator. Leading today's informative discussion, we have RJ King. RJ is the editor of D-Business Magazine, well known. I hardly even need to introduce him, but he's going to moderate today's conversation, introduce our panelists, and then we'll get to some Q&A. Just a reminder, there is a chat area in the box on your right-hand side, so you can submit questions. I have to say we may not be able to get to them all, but if we don't, we'll certainly place them on a website where we will be putting this program. It will stream on our website, so if you know somebody that missed it, please pass it along and they can find it on our website, DetroitChamber.com. And so for now, let me turn it over to RJ.
Well, thank you so much, Tammy, and thank you to the Detroit Regional Chamber for putting on this webinar. I am editor of D-Business Magazine here in Detroit. It's a regional business publication, and then we also have D-Business Daily News, which is a daily e-newsletter, tech and mobility news, and then an annual publication called Detroit 500. What I'd like to do is introduce our panelists and get things underway. First, we have Dennis W. Archer Jr., who's chairman and CEO of 1642 Ventures. Lydia Michael, president and owner of Blended Collective. And we have Billy Strawler, who's CEO and publisher of BLAC Magazine and Milo. And just wanted to say welcome to everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And Dennis, maybe we could start with you, and if you can speak to the importance of reaching and engaging with multicultural, diverse audiences.
Yeah, sure. And I'll be brief because I think that everyone would probably rather hear from Billy and Lydia. But first, RJ, let me just say to you, congratulations on the success of a publication. And Billy is aware of this, but it's a tough business. Particularly given what we've been through, pandemic and all. So the fact that both of you all's publications have continued to thrive. I see them in the back of the black cars all the time. So congratulations. Tammy mentioned in her introduction that it is challenging sometimes to reach diverse audiences. And I would argue that a lot of times the challenge is not reaching them. The challenge is companies deciding to reach out to them. And that challenge is really, and microscopically, I often find, and I'd be interested in what Lydia and Billy find, there are voices within most corporations saying, hey, we need to do this. But the people with the pocketbook say, no, we don't need to do this. We can just show them our general market ad and we'll run it on BET, or we'll run it, on the black radio stations or black targeted digital media, and it'll just work. And the not just the black consumer, but if you were to dissect the total consumer pool by demographics, race, ethnicity, religion, there are a lot of different targets, micro targets there that really should be micro targeted, particularly coming for black folks. I will speak coming out of George Floyd, seeing the disparate nature of the pandemic on black folks and how companies have responded. Traditionally, black folks will respond better to people that they see investing and caring about their communities, where they feel reached out to, particularly. And, in our practice at one of our companies, Ignition Media Group, we advise companies on how to just do that. We critique their creative and their outbound marketing and earned media messaging to ensure that it's inclusive. And sometimes it's a battle. And the battle is normally not with us and our internal client. The battle is within their organization. Budgets are tight. We can't afford to do this. But if you don't make the investment, I find you're going to lose customers. And at the end of the day, everyone's in it for a return on investment. I think investing in targeted, diverse media is the right thing to do. And I know Billy would agree. And I'm interested in hearing what Lydia has to say as well.
Lydia, you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So I'll just continue here where you left off, Dennis. A lot of good points, and definitely agree with everything from what we've seen in working with larger organizations, companies, and different clients. But one statement that I'd like to make, and typically that justifies very quickly as to why we do the work that we do, is that by 2044, and this is according to the US Census Bureau, 50% of our US population is set to be multicultural. And this is a really heavy statistic, right? And so when you look at that, you see that what that means is every other person is going to be of either African American, Asian American, or Latin descent. And do we need to say more, right? So we have about 20 years to go if companies and organizations don't start to make changes now in how they reach and engage these audiences. It's going to be very detrimental, right, in terms of the effects, profits, return on their investment, all of these different things. And so I think it's really important to start paying attention as to how we can reach and engage them. And like you said, Dennis, choosing to reach them, right? And so how can companies do that, and why should they do that? And I think a lot of times companies are faced with a challenge of maybe not really knowing where to start or how to do it. But starting internally a lot of times is probably the easiest way to do that. Is look at your people. Who are you employing? Are there different groups that you can create? Whether they're employee resource groups or just different task forces, different task groups that you can bring together and really try to understand how you can better reach and engage these audiences as a start.
Great, thank you. And Billy, what do you see through your lens?
Well, it's always fun to go last when you're asked one of these questions. So I will agree and say, look, everything that Dennis and Lydia said is spot on. I believe that you have to be intentional. And the challenge that you find within organizations is that there's a difference between inclusion and equity. And while you may have someone of color that works for the company, and I'm talking specifically right now about agencies, if you've not walked in someone's shoes, it's very difficult to make sure that you're putting together a marketing plan that speaks to all of the different audiences that Dennis spoke about. So people love to, I think the old adage is, you buy from people who you like, know, and trust. And that hasn't changed. But if we don't see ourselves in the product in which you're marketing, or if you're not speaking to us in a way that makes sense, we're not coming to buy from your company. So I believe it's really important for companies to make sure that they have people sitting at the table who understand the audience in which they're trying to reach.
And I think one thing that I see that might help companies, and be happy to have the panel weigh in on this as well, but Detroit, I think more than most cities, because of the auto industry, we drew so many nationalities and racial groups and cultures, and we have all these ethnic chambers all over the region, whether the National Business League or the Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce. I was just yesterday with the Arab American and Chaldean Council. So I think this is one way that businesses and organizations that are looking to become more diverse could work with these organizations. They're all right here in town, and they're all experts. Lydia, I don't know if you see that as well.
Definitely, yeah. And to your point, I mean, I'm engaged with a lot of these chambers that you mentioned. One of our clients was actually the German American Business Council that we helped a couple of years ago with their branding and their identity and sort of, starting back up again after being around for such a long time. And so that was a very natural and easy way for us to start when I started the company back in 2017 with Blended Collective was, well, where do we, what areas and what groups can we easily tap into that are already established, right? And so when we work with clients too, what I find is that many times these ethnic chambers are underestimated. What seems so clear to me when I say, okay, well, there's the Chaldean Chamber and the German American Chamber, or, any of them. And people look at me and say, oh, I didn't even think about that. I didn't think of the chamber as a resource, the ethnic chamber. And so that, I think, is definitely one way to go to start and connect with these audiences. And keep in mind, when you're connecting with each one of these ethnic chambers, you're not limited to just that culture, right? The majority of people might be part of that, but it's still a very diverse group of people that you engage with at all of these chambers. So, yeah.
Dennis, how about you? Any ideas on how people can get, or organizations and businesses, if at step one, what can they be doing?
I mean, I think that I agree with Lydia. The chambers are low-hanging fruit, but I also think depending upon who you're trying to target, there are chambers, associations, organizations. When you talk about Black folks, I mean, the churches are a huge entry point into the community. I know with General Motors, I sit on their supplier council, and we are really trying to take our brands to the streets. And so we partnered with large churches and did riding drives with those churches, some on site, some at larger parking lots, but the churches were the sponsors as a way to touch the community directly. And so I don't think that there's one particular path to get to any particular subgroup, but I think that each have their own, and chambers are a great low-hanging fruit. Most every ethnicity or culture has a chamber or association, and they will in turn know others. And so if you're trying to target those groups, that makes sense. But I would also encourage folks to reach out to people like Billy, people like Real Times Media, who that's what they do for a living. And there are agencies that are LGBTQ owned, Asian owned, Hispanic owned, African American owned, that's what they do for a living. And I think oftentimes companies say, well, we'll just try to figure it out ourselves, or we'll hire one person who is of this ethnicity. And so now, you hire one Black person, and that one Black person is supposed to be to tell you about all Black people. Within the African American community, there are multiple subgroups as well. An African American millennial does not want to see the same spot that perhaps my parents do. And so I would suggest that people really make an investment in either inside talent or securing outside agency talent or advisor or consulting talent to help them. You'll get to it much faster. And to Lydia's point, I think the return on investment will be much more significant.
Hey, how about you, Billy?
Yeah, I'd say that, when we think about the different subgroups, my experience may not be the same as Dennis or someone else who has grown up in the African American community. So with all of these different subgroups, it makes it, while chambers are definitely low-hanging fruit, there are other organizations and other groups that we have to look at. I love the idea of getting in the streets and going to the churches. That's an excellent idea. And again, it's about creating community and not just making it lip service, but showing that you truly care and you're getting down and talking to different groups about what's important to them. And so if you're not doing the research, right, you see a lot of companies jump right into tactics. They're like, hey, I want to talk to all the Black folks. So they go to one place, but they're not starting high enough up. So making sure that you're doing research, that you're finding the information that's available to you, and really digging in to make sure that you have a solid strategy. Because if you get the strategy right, you're not going to fight about the tactics later.
Sure. Lydia, how do you ensure that your marketing strategy reflects the audience that you're aiming to reach?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one, we really focus initially when we kick off any project, we focus very heavily on the auditing and the assessment and then also the research stage, right? And so when we do all of that, we want to make sure that we are speaking to people who are close to the product or the service, but also bringing in other people externally, other stakeholders that we can speak to who reflect the different audiences that we are looking to reach. And I know a lot of times doing that type of work is a lot easier for larger organizations and groups and companies because they have the resources. But what I always say to small businesses who might not have the resources to do that is you have to be creative about it. And what that means is instead of maybe hosting these big fancy focus groups that maybe a small business can't afford, you bring together a group of people and run different interviews, or you tap into your community, whether it's friends, families, customers, people, really any community that you can think of that you can bring together, and you will find and be surprised that people are always willing to help, right? And so bringing together a group of people like that, you can gain a lot of insight into likes, dislikes, challenges, pain points that people are experiencing, but also they will provide you with solutions that they want to see in the marketplace. And so again, don't be limited to just the traditional ways of gaining insights such as focus groups, but also look outside of that and see what you can do creatively if you have less resources available.
Lydia, if I could just hop on that for a second. I mean, the technology that exists now to do focus groups digitally, and you can do it anonymously, there's really no excuse not to do what you're suggesting. You no longer have to go get a room with the one-way glass and a tape recorder and do that sort of thing that they used to do 40, 50 years ago. You can, if you get 50 emails, you can drop them into the app, send it out, and get your stuff back, and with charts and graphs, and gives you all the answers and ratings that's almost ready to be presented to a client or to customers immediately. And so there's really not an excuse. And I think I don't know if it was you or Billy that mentioned doing the research. That's an intricate part of the research, very important part of the research, because you can Google it, you can read all the articles, but really talking to people is the best way to do it. Technology enables that today.
Yeah, I'm actually going to jump on. Yeah, I was going to piggyback on what both Lydia and Dennis said, which was, when we have not had a large budget, and this is on the agency side, what we've done with our clients is put together advisory panels that will last for 3 to 6 months. And that's a well that we'll continue to go back to draw insights from. But even for Black on the publishing side, we have a group of people that we go to that are all across the gamut. So you may have someone who lives on the east side, west side, someone in the suburbs, but we're constantly looking for feedback on, are we getting the messaging right? Does it resonate with you, so that we can make changes to the way in which we're talking to the audience to make sure that we're on point.
And I was going to say that, you've seen some of the Microsoft technology that's out there with their Surface platform. That's a great way to, and it doesn't really cost that much. I mean, if you go down to the Microsoft Technology Center in the Rocket Company's building, they'll help you for free if you have any kind of Microsoft product. So if you call into them, they'll certainly assist you, and it's either going to be free or very little money, and they'll stay with it for as long as you'd like. Lydia, trying to reach these diverse audiences, when you're looking at the difference between online and offline, what are some of the tricks of the trade, if you will, that would help increase a company or an organization's access to diverse groups?
I think what you want to make sure of is when you're running really any type of marketing and you're looking at online and offline efforts is to want to maintain the same brand image offline and online, right? That's one of the key things. But then also, how are you able to reach these same audiences online and offline? And I'll give you an example. We worked with a client in the hair care industry a few years back, and it was a multicultural hair care product. And given that they wanted to reach all of the different diverse groups. And so we had put together a strategy to reach and work with different online influencers where each influencer represented a specific ethnicity, cultural group. And so that was great online. But then offline, the brand had a lot of pop-ups here locally, and they would do a lot of brand activations. And so initially when that started, it wasn't really reflective of the different cultural groups as it was online, right? And so we wanted to adapt that, and we wanted to make sure that perhaps the online influencers that we were working with online were the same ones that you could find right at the brand activation and at the pop-up, right? And so for people to sort of see that connection between the brand, whether it's online or offline, right? And so those are different things that you can play with and again, be creative with to make sure that people and customers, consumers feel like they are also in that same brand ecosystem as they are engaging with these different audiences.
How about you, Dennis? I know you've got the great restaurant there in Central Market, and I know you've hosted a lot of events over the years. But that offline portion, whether it's a small business or medium or large business, having initially maybe perhaps just a reception, inviting different diverse groups, and you through that session, talk about your messaging, but also learn about people, get the business cards, and all those types of things. I think that's one way that it doesn't cost a lot of money, and you really can build an audience pretty quickly there that's diverse, that can help you get started.
I mean, I don't know. I can't say it much better than Lydia did, but I would just, I guess, amplify a little bit. The folks are much smarter consumers nowadays, and so they can see through smoke screens. And so if you're doing one thing on the billboard and another thing on your commercials and something else in your earned media statements, and then online you're looking differently, and if any of that comes across insincere, people pick that up relatively quickly. And so you got to first decide as a brand whether you are committed to actually embracing diversity. And then if you are, that's got to be evident across the board. One of my co-panelists mentioned the type of folks that you're hiring in your organizations. I mean, it's got to be who you're hiring, who's on your board, what professional services companies are you hiring, who's in your ads, what do your ads look like? I mean, there are some car companies that put, Black folks, obviously Black folks in their ads, Black families in their ads. Then there are some companies that, put somebody ambiguous in there so they can say, well, maybe they're Black, maybe they're Hispanic, maybe they're Middle Eastern, but we're checking the boxes. People see through that. And so it just depends whether you want your brand to be a brand that welcomes everybody, and you can't welcome everybody with a singular message. It mandates that you adjust your messaging to different audiences. I mean, just common sense. And back to Lydia's point, I mean, I think you said 2044, but the majority of the country is going to be people of color. So it's either get your act together now or get left behind shortly.
How about you? From your viewpoint, you're seeing lots and lots of press releases come your way and media pitches, and you're obviously interviewing individuals and executives. How can companies better reach these diverse audiences through their marketing efforts?
Yeah, the interesting thing is I was thinking about that and I was like, well, it depends on what their objective is. But when we come down to it, I think it's easier, and I'll give you an example. There was a client that we had who wanted to do a lot of traditional marketing, but was heavy into digital. And what we ended up doing was the research showed that their audience was slightly different when it came to direct mail versus if you were doing something online, if you were targeting them on Facebook. But we wanted to be consistent with the messaging for the brand. So what we ended up doing was we overlaid digital television on top of the direct mail. And as far as the consumer is concerned, they don't see a difference between OTT versus going in and turning on their television set. So what we've tried to do is make it seamless for the individual so that they feel like the brand is consistent across all mediums, whether they're meeting us out in person or they're engaging with us online.
And Lydia, if you're introducing a new product and you're trying to make it, whether it's a product or a service, and you're trying to reach a diverse audience and you've never done that before, are there some other ways? I know we talked about the different chambers and ethnic organizations, but are there other ways to begin to reach those diverse audiences, especially if a company's never done that or they've got this new thing, but they don't know where to sort of take it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think number one key is understanding who it is that you're trying to reach, what is the audience, but also what is the subgroup, right? Dennis talked about that earlier, is that within a culture, there still are different subgroups, right? And they all consume differently. They have different consumer behavior. And so understanding that, I think, is number one. And then number two is, what are these different subgroups looking for? What are their needs? What are their challenges, their pain points? And then where are they spending their time, right? And so when I understand who they are, where they are, I can then focus on how I can reach them. But if I don't have any of that information and that data, it makes it really difficult. And so Nielsen, for instance, puts out a multicultural study every year, and they do a report on all of these three key multicultural groups: Asian American, African American, and the Latin group. And so when you look at that, for instance, it shows you that Asian Americans really like to use podcasts a lot. It's really convenient for them. It's portable. It's an easy way to sort of consume a lot of the relevant content that they're seeking, right? If you look at, for instance, Black families, and this was part of the report, television is not really essential for only entertainment, but also it's a key source for news, for information, especially at a time where, there's crisis around justice and equity and those types of topics, right? And so when you have that understanding, you're able to tap into these groups in different ways because you know where they are spending their time and what type of mediums or vehicles you need to use to get that message out successfully to reach these groups.
Beyond Nielsen, is there any other resources out there for folks? Lydia?
Yeah, sorry, say that again, right, RJ?
Oh, beyond Nielsen, are there other resources out there that people can tap into?
What we do is, going back to the ethnic chambers, signing up for those newsletters, for instance, because not only can you attend those events in person, obviously, but if you're subscribed to the newsletters, you're also being updated on cultural news on a regular basis. So I think that's another good one.
Dennis, let's say that you have a client comes to you and you have an assignment and you're trying to reach obviously the Black community and African American community very well, but say you're assigned to reach the Hispanic and Latino community, where would you advise companies to start to work on that?
I mean, depending upon who the client was, it would depend. Obviously the chambers are a good resource. There are a lot of significant Hispanic business owners who are influencers in the community, so I would reach out to them and just would leverage my network. But if it were someone that didn't have that network or those relationships, I would think that I would start perhaps with the chamber here or I would consider partnering with an agency that has the expertise. You know, it's I think gone are the days, I mean, really since probably Global Hue, where you had a single agency focusing on multiple ethnicities. So I would likely first find an agency that I could align ourselves with, who has that expertise, and partner with them to split the pie and not be greedy about it.
Yeah, and we're fortunate here in this region. We have a wonderful organization in that regard, the Michigan Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. That would be one that I would start with. Billy, how about you? You know, if you're trying to reach somebody outside your culture, or you're advising someone to do the same thing, any tips or resources that you might provide?
Sure. One go-to is Pew Research. Another one is Think with Google. And I love working with Think with Google because it shows me how people, especially as we move towards more digital focused marketing, what we're seeing is that Google will give you trends all the way down to what people are searching for and what time they're searching for it. So when I'm thinking about, and again, it depends on the channel and what the objective of the client, but certainly if you're looking for some good insights for online, I would certainly start with Think with Google, and then certainly Pew Research for some of the offline research that you need to do.
And Lydia, we've talked about reaching diverse audiences as part of a marketing strategy, and we've talked about, you know, in general, products and services. But how about on the recruitment side? What are some of the ways that companies, you know, they perhaps look around the office and everybody might be of one race, or it's fairly, you know, static, if you will. But you know, how do you bring in that diverse group and begin to recruit that way?
Yeah, you know, I can speak on our end. I can speak a little bit maybe on the internship side that we've done in the past, where we wanted to make it a point that not only are we working with and for multicultural groups, but we also are reflective of the work that we are trying to do externally. And so I think we did a pretty good job with the internship program in the past, where we would partner with different universities and partner with different cultural programs or groups that they had internally, and really go in there and speak to the students and try to recruit them to come be part of that internship program, right? And so I think that that's a good way to do it on that side of thing. If you, Dennis, Billy, if you want to tap in for the recruiting side, maybe for talent, feel free to do that. But I think on our end too, is we just try to make sure that we are reflective of all of the audiences that we are looking to reach. Because when you have diverse talent internally in-house, the work gets done differently, right? So you're looking at it from an innovative perspective, you're looking at it from a creative perspective. It's just the way you start to think about projects and services changes drastically when you do that. And so again, for us, it's leveraging your network, utilizing local resources that, again, a lot of times are underestimated. We said that about chambers, but also looking at universities, right? There's new, fresh talent coming out of universities every single day. And so how can you leverage that? How can you be a part of that? How can you create these partnerships so that when opportunities arise, whether it's as early as an internship and then these students graduate and then they're looking for a job, right? And so you're already there, you already have these connections, and you can bring that into your network to really expand upon that and also give back at the same time. So that is something that has worked really well for us at Blended Collective.
Dennis, how about you on the recruiting side of your, or go Billy if you'd like.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that that is a challenge that you know, that we've certainly had, but we've had to be intentional about making sure that our organization is reflective of the world as we wish it would be. So we've been made sure that we have, and especially in particular with Black, we've very different people to the table, and not everyone that works for Black is African American. And the reason we've done that is we recognized after the summer of 2020 that we really needed to have people who were also willing to be allies, who understood what was going on within the African American community, but also so that we could have difficult conversations internally to better reflect and pass messages on in our book and with the content that we're putting together. So we've had to, when it comes to recruiting, we've had to go out to the people. And that's what I would say to any company that's looking to create a diverse staff. If someone walks into your office and they don't see themselves reflected there, it's going to be very difficult for them to be comfortable in that situation. So internships is a great way to do that. Going out and speaking to HBCUs and providing opportunity to students there, and any sort of multicultural campus that you can get onto. But you've got to start early in helping even kids recognize that there are careers for them that they don't typically see themselves in. And if we don't start early enough, then we're just going to find ourselves in the same situation.
So in that, in part to complete that task of bringing a more diverse audience into your actual company or organization, Dennis, what are some of the ways that either your organization has or your company has done that, and I know you have multiple companies.
Well, let me answer that.
Clients and what they should do.
Let me answer that regards to us, and then how I would advise others. I would say that very fortunately, primarily because we've been doing business here for a long time, that we don't find that to be a challenge. I think that if you walk into any of our businesses, you will clearly be smacked in the face by the diversity that's there in management and senior positions and C-suites, in the front of the house and the back of the house, if it's a restaurant, our boards, everything, everybody. It's diverse. Its leadership is majority minority, and we can do that and also say that we've got the best talent in the area. Now, having said that, when I suggest to others, Billy talked about going to HBCUs, even large corporations, they'll go to Howard, Morehouse, and Spelman and say that, okay, we've hit them all, when there are dozens of phenomenal universities. I think creating a pipeline for your industry, and one of the two of you mentioned that as well. Go speak at a career day. Not only is it good for our businesses and the industry verticals we're in, we have an obligation to go out and speak to kids and put ourselves forth as someone who's in our field and say, hey, you can achieve this too, but this is what you need to do along the way in terms of studying and preparing. Curriculums you need to focus on, given whatever your particular interest is. And so, we can fulfill that obligation, but also create a pipeline of talent, starting high school. And we take interns, both collegiate and high school interns, each summer. One, they do phenomenal work. They want to learn. They can work their way through the phone and TikTok and Instagram better than I can, for sure. And so you get value out of it, but you also give them value and let them see what they can do in the future. And if all of the people who are participating in this webinar go out and take one or two students, and a lot of these schools, they get credit for it. So it's not even a matter of budget. You can get a good, solid, non-paid intern to come in and help your organization and give them exposure. So I would say if there's one thing that everyone leaves with today, it's like, go out, find a student who wants to work hard and bring them into your organization for the summer. And that's a great start.
Liddy, how do you, I can speak to what we do, and there's various internship programs out there that you can post positions, if you will, and, they come into a portal and you review them all. And it's just an amazing wealth of talent or talent waiting to be matured. But Lydia, when you're trying to go out to colleges and different groups and high schools, even middle schools, how do you start to put the message together that to tell the story not only about your company but also your industry and the exciting opportunities, and to try to interest students and young adults to join a company or take on an internship?
Yeah, I think a lot of times the best way to do it is to share your own personal story, and that's what I like to do, because really those types of experiences and opportunities in my life really made a big difference, and they sort of created the pathway of the industries I ended up working in, right? Just because I was exposed to a specific internship in a specific field. And so sharing those stories, I think, really is something that resonates with the students, and they understand it, because I'm not just telling them something that I think that they should hear, but really I'm sharing my story and what I have gone through. I think another thing that really resonates with them is when you talk about the growth trajectory, right? And so sometimes it's not a linear path that we have. You have experience and might do internships in a lot of different fields, right? And you end up in a completely different space, or you study marketing and you end up in finance, right? I mean, that stuff happens all the time. And so just explaining that to them and showing them the growth trajectory that they can be on, if they put themselves out there, if they're willing to learn, if they're willing to, tap into new opportunities and really start building their network. That the key is also building their network in that space. It's going out and doing and learning, and then making sure that they can position themselves where they want to be.
Dennis, how could people that are assigned to build a more diverse audience, how can they get started? Obviously, they start with their own culture and race, but how can they begin to learn about a different, not only one different culture, but multiple different cultures?
I mean, learn about the cultures from the standpoint of looking for employees.
Yeah, looking for employees, or the marketing messages that you're trying to put out there. I'm from Ireland, and there's sort of this undertow of segmenting people by what county you're from. I mean, our family's from County Clare. There's County Cork, and that can lead to some different things. But how can companies and organizations, whether it's recruiting or marketing, begin to learn about the nuances of different audiences? I mean, it's probably just takes time.
I mean, look, outside of independent research, I mean, I would just submit to you that, the same way Coca-Cola goes and hires a big agency, or, Stellantis hires publicists to advise them as to their media, so can entrepreneurs who own small businesses go find a small agency who's expert in that space. Billy mentioned a couple of different research tools that are available rather inexpensively. So first of all, I would say there's a lot of research that you can find online. Every significant research university publishes and puts out regular information about the diverse marketplace, and all that information is free. But in terms of then how to leverage whatever budget you have to reach those particular people, once you decide that they're an audience that you want to reach, I think that you need to make the investment to do that. I mean, it's no different than, if you have a restaurant, you got to buy foodstuffs, you got to buy beer and wine to sell to folks. You need to invest in your marketing. And that doesn't mean you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. There's probably an agency, advisor, or consultant for every budget. And so I would not shortchange yourself and underinvest, or as it relates to reaching these communities, because hopefully if you select the right employee, partner, consultant, then you will get a return on that investment.
RJ, it's Tammy. We do have a couple of questions that have been added, and thought I might throw them out since we're starting to run out of time. The first one's an easy one. Dennis, there was a question about the app that you talked about for creating digital focus groups. Can you share the name of that again?
I did not hear it because I don't recall it, but I can definitely, if whoever has that question wants to, if I can get their information, I can have someone from the office send it out to them.
All right, we'll be happy to do that. We do have the individual's contact. So the next question is, there's a lot to it, but I'm going to guess that those of you as experts are going to be able to help us with this. So what our individual is asking is, you know, yes, 2044 racial ethnic demographics will shift, but thinking about the consumers and the prevalence of disposable income, the wealth gap, home ownership rates, entrepreneurship rates, college graduation rates. There's so much more than that significantly challenges our nation. So the idea of more Black and Brown people fighting for low-wage jobs, living in poverty, etc., is a threat to business success, but can it be? It would be great to hear about the evolution of, you know, continued sustainability as a part of a greater sophistication and diversity in marketing. So I think this sort of gets to the point of RJ's question about somewhat recruiting, but also crosses over to more jobs for more people. While things will change going forward, you know, how can diversity in marketing help in that respect?
I mean, I'll take a stab at it. It is a multifaceted question. And I think part of it is intentionality around recruiting, but part of it is also getting involved in policy. I mean, if the point of the statement in question is that it sounds like in some that there may not be a large enough talent pool inclusive of Black and Brown people. And what I would say to that is that goes all the way back down to how folks are educated, particularly in urban markets. I mean, if you just take Michigan as an example and take Detroit, Pontiac, Inkster, Muskegon Heights, you can go down the list, and how our educational systems and institutions are disparately funded compared to wealthier suburbs. And then if you layer on top of that a No Child Left Behind situation where people are matriculated grade by grade when really they shouldn't be. And so then you get folks in high school that aren't ready to be in high school, and all that just layers on top of each other. So one, there has to be intentionality on organizations to, in my opinion, to go out of their way to hire folks. It's not just good enough to, hey, well, we interviewed a few of them. Well, okay, did you hire any of them? And then once you brought them on board, did you ensure they stayed? Because I think statistics would bear out that a disproportionate amount of minority entrants into positions leave those positions. And among those reasons are they're not feeling welcome, mentored, they don't see an identifiable career path. So not only do you have to hire us, you have to make sure that we are comfortable in our position and know what our future holds. So that's on the intentional side, being the employer. But from a policy side, I mean, all of us who have those concerns need to get involved in the policy discussion and try to change some of the systemic and institutional challenges that we face that, you know, are yielding perhaps not as large of a pool of talent as we would like.
And it definitely gets to the equity discussion, which is going to be very, very important for our future. Billy, I think I saw you trying to also chime in.
Oh, no, I was just nodding because there was no better person to answer that question than Dennis. Well said.
There we go. Lydia, any comments on that?
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Dennis had to say, because I think the equity portion that comes into that is once you have the intentionality and those people are on staff and they're hired and you have all of that diverse talent, equity becomes a question because you want to retain these people. And in order to retain them, they have to be doing a good job. And in order to do a good job, you need to make sure that they have, or the employer needs to make sure that they have the resources that they need. And the resources that I need may be different than the resources that Billy or Dennis need, right? And this is really where equity comes into play, in wanting to make sure that all of this talent, this diverse talent that we have brought on, and again, based on the different subgroups too, not just putting them into a box of one culture, one ethnicity, but understanding what resources they need to be successful and to be able to do their job well. so that we can retain them, right? Hiring is one thing, but then are they actually staying on board, right? Do they leave after a year? Are they staying at the company? So I think that's where equity becomes a really important factor to take into consideration.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, that echoes a lot of what Dennis says, and a lot more conversation we could have about that in a totally separate discussion. So I jumped in on you, RJ, because we did have that question, but we've got about 6 minutes left for you. Do you have a final question for the panel?
Well, I think one thing that I thought of is, and I've seen it at different companies, and it's more so for larger corporations, but one effective tool that I've seen is, internal surveys of employees about, and obviously they're, nobody knows who's filling out which survey, but you're getting all these answers from the surveys. You can ask about what the employees feel about the internal workplace, whether they feel it's diverse. You might think it's diverse, but maybe some of the employees don't think that's the way. And from that kind of feedback, that'll help guide you to, a better outcomes and a more diverse group within your organization. And I think if you have that, then that will, as Dennis said earlier, that will naturally reflect outward. So I don't know if anybody has had any experience or has any other ideas about, making sure that everyone feels that the organization is diverse. How do you do that?
I mean, I think, RJ, people just got to speak up, man. I think half the time, I don't want to say half the time, a lot of times people don't even realize that their environment that they're in is not diverse. I mean, I don't know, the two of you, I don't know how many times you've been in a room and you're looking around and you're the only one in there and you're noticing that, but the white folks in there are not noticing that. They're not saying, many of them are not saying to themselves, oh, this is an all white room. There's no one else in the room. It's very homogeneous, because a lot of times they don't realize it. But it's incumbent upon us to say, hey, do you look around this room? I mean, I went to a conference in Arizona, and I was sitting with a friend of mine who were in the same industry that this conference was for, and there's 500 people here. And I looked around and I said, man, there's only 4 Black folks here. And, there are a smattering of Asian folks in the room, maybe a few Hispanic folks, but it was predominantly like 90-something% white male. And I don't think any of those white males were sitting there saying to themselves, there's not a lot of people of color here. And so I took a picture of that space and I went to the people responsible and said, this is a problem. And so it's incumbent upon us to speak up to try to change that. And it's shame on us if we don't.
Yeah, in my experience, and I've been in that situation often, where I'm sitting with either a client or I'm walking into a conference and I'm one of a handful. But when you pull someone aside and you point that out, like Dennis said, they're unaware. And so there's also the challenge of, there are some of us that are in better positions to speak up than others. And so there also has to be the ability to feel that there's a safe space to be able to bring that up and talk about how do we be intentional about diversity without feeling like you're putting yourself as the angry Black person or Asian person and so on.
How about you, Lydia? Any final comments?
No, I agree with what Dennis and Billy had to say. I mean, I've had the situation happen to me too, maybe more so on the gender side, culture side as well, but definitely gender side, where you're in a room full of males and it's just male dominated and you're the only woman there, right? And you sort of have to keep it moving. And so I think that's another thing that we don't speak about enough, right? It's typically just culture in the multicultural setting, but also what about gender or even age demographics, right? When you're in a room as as a minority in general, regardless of those factors. So,
RJ, let me just say this too. If I could just take another minute. I mean, I would just say I've been involved in the chamber for a very long time. And I'm not just saying this because Tammy's here to blow smoke, but with the events that have happened over the past couple of years, the chamber pivoted really immediately to being a resource to talk about these subjects. And one of the things that we talked about at the chamber is that, and which goes back to your question, or I think Lydia making the point that you've really got to reflect internally what you're advising outbound. And so, one of the things that was important to us as a chamber is that we can't give advice and host all these webinars and seminars in which we're walking the walk ourselves. And so we internally looked at who we were hiring, who our vendors were, what our programming was, what our membership looked like, what were hindrances to small businesses joining, Black businesses to joining, and made a significant pivot with this programming we're doing now being a part of that. And so that's just a prime example of an organization. I think both Billy and Lydia said the same thing in talking about being intentional. The organizations have to make a decision to be intentional. If they do not do that, they're going to find them behind their competitors that are being intentional. And in my mind, they only got a couple of years to get it together, or it's going to be a problem.
Okay, I think that does it. Tammy, I'll hand it over to you to close her out.
All right, thank you, RJ, and thanks so much for your great moderation. Dennis, thank you. I was going to bring up some of the chamber's efforts. It's been an interesting travel experience for us for the last 18 months. We've got many more years ahead of us to keep going. But I will say that what we are accomplishing is because of leaders on our board like Dennis, like a Carla Walker Miller, like a Ron Hall, a Suzanne Shank, the people who really care about what we change in Detroit and the future of our region. So I also would say that in order to get things right in your organization, make sure you get the right people in leadership positions to make sure your strategy is right going forward. I have to thank our panel. They were just, I have to say, very, very amazing. To Dennis, Lydia, Billy, and RJ, it was a really engaging discussion. We only had a couple of questions, but there is definitely one about providing more information about resources or apps that were discussed today. So we'll deal with the panel to try and get those links for you and get them posted on our website so that you have that. I mean, surely there was plenty of great resource information today. And once again, I do have to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, for sponsoring today's event and our whole Black and Diverse Owned Business Series, and our friends at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, Peer Michigan Business Connect. We appreciate your participation and your interest in this series. It's been a long few months of this series, and we've really appreciated the participation there. And we look forward to continuing programs into the future. I'll remind you that if you visit DetroitChamber.com/equity, you can find all of the previous programs as well as today's. And, I can't give you the information I would love to about the next program series that we're going to start up in the fall with a great new partner. But I hope you'll stay tuned because we think it's going to be pretty exciting, very valuable, and will be very, very intentional, as Dennis mentioned. So I thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.